Welcome back to the Shadows Podcast. It's been a while, but it feels good to say those words once again. The past 6 months have been an incredible journey, a time of reflection and growth down in beautiful Tampa, Florida. And now I'm back here in California, ready to take the Shadows into its next evolution. But before we dive in, I want to take a moment to say thank you. We recently celebrated 5 years of the Shadows Podcast. That's 5 years of stories, conversations, and connection. And none of this would have been possible without you, our listeners and supporters who have been with us since day one. So from the bottom of my heart, I say thank you. And with that milestone comes change. Now, based on your feedback, the Shadows is moving beyond the traditional interview format. And from here on out, we'll be exploring movies, music, books, and yes, those emotional triggers that impact us day in and day out. And all through the lens of emotional intelligence and holistic well being. So let's start with one that means a lot to me personally. I'm talking about Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, I've always loved this film. I even have Zero, Jack Skellington's ghost dog, tattooed on my forearm. Every year, my family and I make it a tradition to watch Nightmare Before Christmas at El Capitan Theater in Hollywood. But this year, I watched it differently. I watched it through the lens of emotional intelligence. And that perspective changed everything. Now, before we jump in, here's what we are going to unpack today. We have 3 talking points. First, we're going to talk about Jack Skellington's identity crisis. What happens when you have everything you thought you wanted, but you still feel empty inside? Second, we're going to shift over to Sally's quiet strength, how empathy, intuition, and emotional boundaries can be just as heroic as saving the day. And finally, we'll wrap up the balance between Halloween and Christmas, a lesson on embracing wholeness instead of living in extremes. Now, each of these connections directly tie into emotional intelligence and what it means to live with alignment of mind, body, and emotion. Before we go any further, let's pause for a second and talk about what I mean when I say holistic health. We often think of health as something physical, what we eat, how we train, what our body looks like, but holistic health goes beyond the gym. It's a complete picture, mind, body, emotions, all working together. It's about alignment. Your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, all moving in the same direction. It's about being just as intentional with your mindset and your emotional habits as you are with your diet and your workout routine. So as we break down The Nightmare Before Christmas through the lens of emotional intelligence, remember, we're not just talking about movie characters. We're talking about us and how we show up in every session of our own lives. Right, now that we've established that, let's go ahead and dive into talking point number 1, Jack Skellington's identity crisis, the cost of more. Have you ever hit a point where everything looks great on paper, but somehow it still doesn't feel right? That's Jack Skellington in a nutshell. He's the Pumpkin King, top of his game, loved, respected, and has an entire town singing his praises. Literally, it's a musical if you haven't watched it. But despite all the success, he's empty. He's burnt out. He's searching for something that makes him feel alive again. You even hear him say it early in the movie when he's like, yes, another Halloween. And let's be real, we've all been there. You've hit the promotion that you've been chasing. You've changed duty stations. You've moved to a new location or even reached that fitness goal. And after the high wears off, you're right back to asking yourself, okay, what's next? Or what now? So Jack does what many of us do when we feel stuck. He changes everything. He finds Christmas Town and says, oh, that's it. That's who I'll be now. He swaps pumpkins for presents, cobwebs for candy canes, and fully commits to a life that isn't really his. It's funny because we do the same thing in real life. Maybe it's switching jobs, jumping to a new relationship, or moving across country thinking this will finally fix the restlessness inside. But just like Jack, we often forget to ask the one question that actually matters. Why am I really unhappy? That's where emotional intelligence comes in. Specifically, self awareness, if you've heard us talk about this in past episodes. Without it, we end up chasing external changes to solve internal problems. Jack didn't need to become Santa Claus. He needed to reconnect with what makes him feel purpose in the first place. He didn't need a new holiday, he needed new meaning. And that's the takeaway for all of us. Fulfillment doesn't come from changing where you are, but from understanding who you are and bringing that version of yourself wherever you go. So now let's unpack talking point number 2, Sally's quiet strength, emotional awareness and boundaries. So we're going to shift the spotlight from Jack to the real MVP of The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is Sally. While Jack's out there hijacking holidays and causing pure chaos, Sally's in the background quietly observing everything. She's the voice of reason, calm, patient, emotionally aware, but she's also often ignored. And let's be honest, how many of us have been Sally in someone else's chaos? Sally is that friend who can see the storm coming before anyone else does. She's stitched together literally and emotionally, but she stays grounded. She's not trying to control anyone outside of the frog's breath. She just sets her boundaries and speaks her truth. Now, in real life, being a Sally can be exhausting. Maybe the one always helping your coworkers manage their stress while no one checks in on you. Or maybe in your relationship, you're constantly being the emotional anchor while the other person's chasing one shiny distraction after another. Now, maybe as you're listening to this, you have that Jack in your life, that person who has so many new ideas, that person who is all over the place, and you can almost foreshadow what's going to happen based on their history. Sally represents emotional awareness. She feels deeply, but she doesn't let those emotions control her. That's huge when we talk about emotional intelligence. She shows us the importance of empathy without boundaries. Because here's the truth, caring for other people doesn't mean carrying their chaos. You can love someone and still protect your peace. You can show empathy and still say, that's not mine to fix. And a lot of us are fixers. And maybe that's why Sally resonates with so many of us. She reminds us that strength isn't always loud and flashy. Sometimes it's quiet, it's steady. It's the person who holds everything together while everyone else is trying to reinvent the wheel. In a world that celebrates the loudest voices, Sally teaches us that emotional intelligence often whispers, but when it speaks, it changes everything. All right, now let's pivot to talking point number 3, the balance between Halloween and Christmas, wholeness over extremes. So let's talk about the bigger picture, the tug of war between Halloween and Christmas that unfolds in this movie. On the surface, it's fun, spooky meets festive, but symbolically, it's about balance. Jack goes all in on one extreme, trying to become Christmas. And in the process, he loses sight of who he really is. And that's something we can all relate to. We do it when we go from, I'm going to work out every day and eat clean, to we've stumbled because we've earned it and we're going to start over again next week. We do it where some of y'all out there say, well, I'm done with dating. And then 2 days later, you download dating apps because you want to see what's out there. Or when we finally tell ourselves we're going to slow down, but then we fill up our calendar, we're out doing something that very next day. We live in a world of extremes, all or nothing, hustle or burnout. But real emotional intelligence lives in the middle. It's about integration, not replacement. Jack didn't need to choose Halloween or Christmas. He needed to find a way to blend the best of both. And that's what balance looks like in real life too. You can choose growth without abandoning gratitude. You can rest without feeling lazy. You can love deeply without losing yourself. Holistic health and emotional balance, comes from understanding that you can be both light and dark, disciplined and spontaneous. But holistic health and emotional balance come from understanding that you can be both light and dark, disciplined and spontaneous, strong and soft. And maybe that's the hidden beauty of The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's not about choosing between holidays, it's about realizing both sides complete the story. So next time you feel torn between two extremes, between who you've been and who you're becoming, remember, you don't have to pick one. You can be both. You can be whole. So we have unpacked all three takeaways from A Nightmare Before Christmas from an emotional intelligence standpoint. So when you really look at this movie, it's not just a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie. It's a story about rediscovery, about learning who you are when the titles, the routines, and all the noise fade away. Jack reminded us that chasing more doesn't equal fulfillment. Sometimes the real answer is already within the life that you've built. Sally showed us that emotional awareness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That quiet strength and healthy boundaries are what keep us centered. And the balance between Halloween and Christmas, that's a reminder we all need. The goal isn't to live at one extreme, but to embrace the full spectrum of who we are. So as I sit back here in California and I'm reflecting on the past 6 months that I had in Tampa, I can honestly say this new chapter of the Shadows podcast is going to be exciting. I feel like it's aligned with where we want to go. And 5 years in, I'm still learning, still growing, still uncovering the new layers of what it means to live with emotional intelligence. It is not something you can snap your finger and have ingrained into your system. I have been on an emotional growth journey for quite some time, and I am showing it here on this podcast. And these are some of the steps that I've taken to get myself where I want to be. So as you step back into your own story this week, ask yourself, where am I chasing Christmas when I'm already the Pumpkin King? Where do I need to slow down, listen like Sally, and find balance between my own holidays? Because growth isn't about changing everything, it's about seeing what's always been there in a whole new light. Thank you for 5 years of support, encouragement, and connection. I'm excited for what the future brings to the Shadows podcast. We're going to keep diving into films, music, books, emotional triggers that help us all understand ourselves just a little bit better. Until next time, keep embracing the shadows. Make sure you subscribe on all podcast platforms. See you next week here on the Shadows Podcast.